All right, everybody. Thanks for joining today. Really appreciate this. And this is part of our, I guess, twice monthly discussion on cybersecurity. And we thought it would be really valuable to talk a little bit more about multi-factor authentication today. And I hope that the presentation answers any questions that you may have. And if there's anything that you want to ask, put them into the chat or the Q&A. And it looks like I've got JP here now available to help me out as a co-host, and we'll do the best we can to answer those as we go. All right. Every presentation, we like to just remind everybody, our perspective around technology is this concept that investing in technology is an investment in helping your business achieve its goals and overcome its challenges. This slide we have here, I'm not going to go into a ton of detail, but this is what we call our brand commitment. We talk about it internally with all of our staff, and we hope that it expresses to all of our clients, how we are, different and how we approach, supporting technology within your organizations. Today's agenda, we're going to start off just really quickly talk about some of the most common cyber threats. That's going to expand into why multi-factor is important, what it is, how to set it up, and then at the end, we've got some time hopefully available to do some Q&A. So some of these slides, if you've been on any of our other cybersecurity presentations, you'll see similar content, but focused on a different area. So when we talk about the common threats that are out there, in movies and that, you'll often see these hackers, right? These people that are pushing out malicious code that are, trying to find vulnerabilities in software. And when we take a look at the reported threats, from an IT person's perspective, we see that about 20% of them are coming from those types of, hacking situations. The other 80% come from these three. And you'll notice that they all revolve around compromised credentials. So the first thing, the most common, I guess, attack vector is through phishing. These are those emails that you get where, it says, hey, your Netflix account has expired. Click here to update your information. You'll see in a couple of slides, these attacks continue because they are incredibly effective. They make a fake web page, they capture the information that people put into them, and then they use the information that they've got out of phishing attacks to execute brute force attacks, which is trying a large number of usernames and passwords against an Office 365 or a QuickBooks Online or something like that. And then, of course, the other 30% of these are coming from data that has been exfiltrated, meaning somebody has found a vulnerability in a web page like Yahoo or Ashley Madison. They've logged in, they've stolen usernames and passwords from those. And the whole idea is just recognizing that the value of an email account is incredibly high, because we can use access to an email account to leapfrog into other sites and services and pieces of information. Now, the traditional approach, and I say traditional because we've all signed up for different sites and services, and it's always a username and a password that we need in order to set up those services. And as we've gone on, we've got all of these statistics here that tell us about why the password has become a weakness. For a lot of businesses, they haven't really wrapped their heads around the fact that people have a personal life online, they have a business life online, and then you might have a shared kind of online presence where people are logging in using passwords that multiple people in your organization know. Now, Passwords, just to get this out of the way, we want to make sure that every site or service that you log into, you use a unique password that is, depends who you talk to, 16 or 20 characters minimum. And you can imagine that if you're typing those in, you're not going to be able to do it. And so we start seeing where employees in particular are reusing passwords. They're saving passwords in insecure tools like a Word document or an Excel document. And often they are sharing passwords with each other, which of course opens a whole nother, can of worms if that employment relationship changes, let's say. And the thing is that when we looked at those threats, the reason that most of them come through brute force and compromised credentials is because, quite frankly, it's just a lot easier. Cyber criminals don't need to hack their way into a system if they can just get a username and a password and use that to log in as a legitimate user. First of all, it's a lot easier. Second of all, they're less likely to be detected because they're an authenticated user. And so we start seeing some of these stats here. And I want to point out number 2, because when I first was going through these stats, and I saw that up to 19% of people who opened a typical phishing campaign demonstrated a willingness to submit requested data. So it's a bit of a vague statement. What I can tell you is that we just completed a phishing campaign against a client, and they get those fake emails. And there were, I think it was about 7 users who clicked on the fake email and entered information into the page, which is a giant red flag immediately. That we were able to, first of all, identify those users. Now we can provide some training on them. And so these stats are 100% legitimate. And it really goes to point out that the threats start with the user, right? And this is, again, something we talk about internally a lot, is that, we can put all of the greatest technology in the world onto a network, but if the users are not aware of cyber risk, they are going to expose the business, to those types of attacks. The other challenge is that as we, as business people, put tools and policies in place, we need to get our users to buy in and to use them, and that's a whole nother challenge. So when it comes down to it, there are essentially 4, best practices or recommendations that the cybersecurity world is going to talk about in the coming year. First of all, multi-factor authentication, which is what we're here to talk about today, which is multiple methods of identifying yourself, essentially. And we'll go into it a little bit more. Single sign-on is becoming more common. And what this means is that once you are authenticated into a trusted service like Office 365, as an example. So I've logged into Office 365 with a username and password and a multi-factor token. Well, I can now set up a single sign-on to log into something like QuickBooks Online, so that I go into Office 365, I click one button, and it authenticates me into QuickBooks Online rather than having separate usernames and passwords for those. The password server one on here, really what this is about is making sure that you as an organization are providing a password manager to your staff. I believe that this is going to be one of the next, threats or challenges that businesses face, is when you have a user, an employee who leaves your organization, who owns the passwords, right? We all like to think that we know what our staff are logging into, what they're using, what they had access to. But unless the staff are using a password manager that you've provided, we're going to get into a gray area there where people might feel that they own that information. And then security awareness training. For anybody who's had to fill out a cyber insurance application, you likely are starting to see where insurance providers are requiring that you have a security awareness training program in place, because insurance companies recognize that many of the breaches that happen are because of individuals who make a little mistake that turns into a big problem. So what is multi-factor authentication? Multi-factor authentication is using 2 or more methods of identifying yourself. So we have on here something a username and a password combination. This is what we, I think, historically and traditionally have used to authenticate ourselves or to prove we are who we are when we try to log into Office 365 or our bank or PayPal or whatever it is. So that's kind of the standard. The other 2, something you have or something you are, may not be the best phrasing, but anyways, you get the point, is that something you have is saying every time I try to log into web page A, it's going to ask me for an authentication code that is coming from a text message or an application that I have on my cell phone or an application that's on my computer. Proves that I own more than one piece of identification that are separated from each other. And then something you are, we're starting to see more of this. These would be biometrics. Microsoft with Windows 10, started rolling out what they call Windows Hello, where your camera is, taking a look at your face, doing facial recognition and identifying you that way. All right, so that is what multi-factor authentication is. I'm going to play a quick little video. It's from Microsoft. It's about 2 minutes. I'm going to play it at about 1.5 speed about how to set up multi-factor authentication, because it gives us a good overview into what the process actually looks like. And even though it's for Office 365, it's similar. So the idea, first of all, is, of course, that you're logging in with a username and password. Whichever site you're going to use, you have to set up multi-factor authentication to work. We'll notice on here that they had the choice of a phone and a mobile app. The general preference is to use a mobile app, just higher level of security and ability to back it up and those types of things. So in this case, they're using the Microsoft Authenticator. When you're setting it up the first time, it's going to pop up and give you this QR code. The next thing that you're going to need to do is install the Authenticator app on your phone. So you'd go to the App Store, the Play Store. You'd find, in this case, the Microsoft Authenticator. You'd install it, and once it's in, you're going to, of course, set up the account, click the plus, and then you're going to scan the QR code. And what this is going to do is it's then going to generate, either a 6, a 7, an 8 character verification code that you would enter into that web page to prove that first step, that this is something you have. So now you have your username and your password. That's something you know. You now have a verification code, something you have. As a backup, it wants you to enter your text message or your cell phone, and it'll send you a text message as well. And that way you've got more than one option if you lose access to the app or any of those types of things. Now, that process was obviously for Office 365. However, setting up multi-factor authentication is something that you really should look at on all of the web pages that you use. So examples of those pages, I always like to start by thinking about things that have financial information. So, PayPal, QuickBooks, if you do any kind of Bitcoin and those types of things. If you use any payroll processing or those types of services, think about your highest value information. Now, when you log into these sites, they don't all enable multi-factor authentication by default. Sometimes you have to go and you have to search for them. And you would do that typically through, once you log in, you go to accounts, go to settings, and, find security, enable multi-factor authentication. It's going to be a little bit different in every site. One of the challenges that we run into as IT providers is that every one of the sites that uses multi-factor authentication is going to have different standards and policies about how you enforce it. So as an example, QuickBooks Online has driven me absolutely crazy, because even though I am a company administrator and I'm allowing other staff access to QuickBooks Online, I haven't traditionally been able to go into QuickBooks Online and slide a switch that says, force all users to enable multi-factor authentication. Whereas in other services that we use in our business, we're able to do that. So, those are the things that we need to look at. So if you're using something like QuickBooks Online and it's not allowing you to enforce that policy through technology, a slider, then you want to make sure that you're coaching your staff, that you're showing them how it's done so that they can enable those. Okay. That's all the content that we have prepared. So we can do some Q&A. And if anybody has any questions, we've got one in chat. We can unmute you if you'd rather do it that way as well. Thank you for joining us. Let's do some Q&A. So one comment, I'm not crazy about the idea of using my personal phone for business access. Are there other options? Also, if I leave my company, how easy and secure is it to transfer my phone number away? So there's a whole bunch of questions in here. So the first one, I'm not crazy about using my personal phone for business access. Are there other options? So yes, there are other options. The Microsoft Authenticator that they showed you, there are other products as well. One that I use is called Authy. Authy has a desktop application that I can install on my work computer, as an example, and I can get my authentication codes through that. If I leave my company, how easy and secure is it to transfer my phone number away? And I'm not 100% clear on that. If the phone is registered in your name personally, then the business has no retention of that. Now, where a business may run into some challenges with that is, let's say a member of our staff left and they were the one who had the administrative account set up to log into one of our web portals. If that phone number is being set up as the multi-factor authentication, we're going to have to see how the different sites and services handle that. Sometimes you have to open a support ticket. Sometimes you got to collaborate with that person to get those multi-factor codes back from them. All right. Do we have any solutions when we assist on accounts for seniors and for seniors owners? And then about shared mailboxes. So probably the best solution, or the easiest solution when you're dealing with people who are not going to be comfortable using the app, is potentially using the SMS, the text message authentication. There's lots of opinions about whether text messaging should be used for two-factor, and people will tell you that it can be, you can steal someone's cell phone number and you can intercept those messages. I think it's fairly unlikely that becomes a large risk. People typically try to try to get in or break into the lowest security accounts that they can access. So you might want to use text messaging for those ones. And then what if a mailbox is being shared by multiple people in the office? So does everyone need to set up authentication separately, like info at? So first of all, a shared mailbox, typically, and so in the Office 365 context, a shared mailbox typically can't be logged into. You as a user are granted access to view and manage that mailbox. So as an example, if JP and I both had access to a helpdesk at tier3it.ca mailbox, we wouldn't actually go to the Office 365 portal and try to log into helpdesk. I would log into Jesse at, he would log into JP at, I would use my username and password, my two-factor code. And then when I got into the Jesse at portal, I would be able to click on the help desk mailbox to view it. Now, if you're using a different type of shared setup where you legitimately have multiple users logging into one mailbox, we would recommend against that. That is going to cause all kinds of problems for you in terms of managing the mailbox, managing access and information and all that. All right. Any other questions out there?
One thing I would add maybe to the senior owner's part is if you are using, let's say, the Microsoft Authenticator for any of the Microsoft online portals, is that it actually pops up to say approve or deny rather than having to type in a code and all that stuff. So it might actually be a little bit easier than maybe on paper, it sounds like.
Yeah. Is there an additional cost? On Office 365, I feel like there is, I think they've included it in most of the packages now. Most of the other ones that we showed, the PayPals and QuickBooks, there's no extra cost typically. It's just a matter of jumping through the hoops to turn the option on. All right. Does anyone have any other questions? All right, well, I'm going to just stop the recording